Welcome back to Soulfield TV. This is Dawn, and this is our first Thank God It's Monday video. On this Monday morning devotional video, we are going to talk about the wilderness experiences that we have in life, those challenging moments and challenging seasons that we have in life. After the year that we had in 2020, I really felt like this was a good way to go into the new year. Many of us are going into the new year feeling the same way that we felt when the year ended. And so I wanted to create an opportunity for us to feel encouraged and challenged and to really feel like we can do this. We can survive. We can move forward. And so, yes, it's a new year, but it's the same things. And we still worship the same God. And his promises are still true. So stay tuned. Let's jump on in. 2020 was, as my best friend would say, the trash can. Okay? Now, I don't want to dog the year out because it was still a year that God gave us. It was still a blessing, yes, but oh my God. It was, for so many, the hardest thing we have ever had to experience in our lives. For others, it just felt like one of many difficult challenges in life. But the reality is that it was filled with so many unpleasantries. Now, there were some things about 2020 that wasn't too bad, right? There are lots of us who can make a laundry list of ways that the Lord was present with us, the Lord blessed us, and how we still felt prosperous in the year. But I think hands down, everybody would agree that 2020 was hard. Some of the strongest people and most emotionally resilient people that I know had a really hard time last year. The Bible tells us that we were not created to be alone, yet being alone in isolation was exactly what we needed to do in order to survive 2020. The year was so difficult emotionally, mentally, spiritually, financially. We were tested and we were tried. And so here we are, the year of 2021, and many of us are afraid to hope. We are afraid to dream. We are afraid to think that there's actually something good that can come. Every year we're saying, this is my year. God gonna do this and that. Now, I do it too. So I'm not judging and I ain't making fun of nobody. I do it too. I'm always expecting God to do something big and amazing in the next year. But we're afraid to do that because so much about 2021, so much about this moment, this day, feels just like every day and every moment and every month that we experienced in 2020. So what do we do? What do we do in those moments where it feels like nothing is changing? Everything in life is static. It's staying just as it is. We want to anticipate the hand of God. We want to believe that he wants good for us, but it feels like everything is staying the same. What do we do? Well, when we look at the people of Israel, when we look at their experience in the wilderness, I imagine that they were asking the same questions. Every day, every week, every month, every year was the same thing. And they had complaints galore. They had questions for God, and rightfully so. We're not being faithless by asking God, yo, what's happening here? It's actually a sign of our faith to look at God and say, God, I believe that you have the answers. I'm coming to you asking what's going on here. So the people of Israel had legitimate, valid questions. They also had some questions and some complaints that weren't so valid. But here we are, just like them, looking to God with questions. What's happening here? Here's the hard lesson that the people of Israel had to learn, and I think a lesson that many of us are learning as 2020 goes into 2021. God's promise to us is provision, it's protection, it's safety. He promised to bring us through things, but God doesn't promise to shield us from wilderness experiences. And so 2020, this pandemic, the hard places in life, the wilderness experiences that we have in life, they're not indicators that God has changed, that God isn't good or that he's cruel. actually our survival of those difficult things in life are indicators that God is still with us. It's indicators that God is still keeping us. And in the midst of difficult, painful, messy aspects of life, that God and his goodness still reigns in our life because he's keeping us. That's what Romans 8:28 is all about. Romans 8:28 isn't a promise that we'll never experience bad things, that we'll only have good things in our life. Romans 8:28 is the promise that in spite of those things, God will make that thing be good for us in the end. And it's hard because we can't dictate and determine what that good thing will be, but God's promise is still true. We can hope in the constant, never changing nature of God. And because we can hope in that, we can stand on his promises. See, the people of Israel began to forget the promises of God. They began to forget what he said and who he was. As they went through the wilderness experiences, they forgot that they were once slaves. They actually would say, I prefer Egypt in slavery because we had some good food over there. At least we could take some baths and we had a roof over our head. Here we are laying out on the ground, eating this random bread that's falling from the sky and then mildew at night called manna. Right? So they had all these complaints. We're thirsty, Moses. We need some water. So they had all these complaints that made them think, okay, we prefer slavery. But they forgot that while they were slaves, when God was punishing their slave masters, that he protected them. When the livestock of the slave masters were damaged and killed because of the plague, theirs wasn't. When their food was rotten, theirs wasn't. When their firstborn was dying, theirs wasn't. God protected them and freed them from slavery and taking them to a point of promise. They forgot how God's hand was on them in slavery and God's hand was on them still in the wilderness as he was making them his people. God was showing himself to the people of Israel, but that wilderness experience kept them from seeing it. That's what happens to us. We're in the wilderness and we forget that God made some promises to us, and those promises, he didn't take them away. They don't change. And so what are those things that God has promised you? Maybe he said it to you in 2019, but 2020 happened and you were just like, look, I might have heard wrong. Maybe he said it to you in the beginning of 2020 and March came around and you was like, oh, ain't no way he said that to me. Because if he said that to me, then I wouldn't be going through this. He didn't lie when he said it. He just didn't tell you that 2020 was going to be like it was. God doesn't always reveal the full story, but sometimes, just like the people of Israel, we go through a wilderness experience. The promise is still there, but we're in a period where we just got to go through this first. And so my encouragement to you is not to be blinded by the wilderness. Fight not to look around at all of the difficult things around you and the challenges around you and then forget that this moment will pass and God's promises will still be true. So I want you to write it down somewhere. What did God promise you? Put it somewhere where you can see it. Maybe you don't write it down. Maybe you make it the screensaver on your phone. Maybe you make it the screensaver on your computer. Maybe it's a sticky note and you just put it in your car. I don't know. Maybe you just start praying about it again, seeking the Lord about it again. What is it that you have to do to remember the promises of God? Next week, we're going to do a part 2 to this. We're going to look at the promises that are specifically in scripture. There are things that God speaks to us individually in our prayer time, in our devotional time, that it's clear is for us, that this is something that God is saying to us. But there are things that God put in scripture that are just for all of his children. So next week, we're going to look at those promises. It's just a part 2 to this. What are we holding on to? What are the things that we want to remember as we move forward in 2021? And just in life in general, to be honest. This applies to all of life. So next week, we're going to look specifically at 7 biblical promises that God has made clear in his scripture that is important for us to remember as we go through life. Thank you for watching this episode of Thank God It's Monday devotional videos. I hope that it was a blessing to you. I blessed myself in just studying and preparing for this and praying. I needed to hear this, and I pray that it was a blessing to you. Please share this, subscribe, hit that bell for notifications so that you will know when more videos come out. My prayer always is that for those who view the videos will be encouraged, will be strengthened, and will be able to move forward to the next day, the next week, the next month of your life, and that God will show himself strong. Thank you for joining me, and I will see you next time.